Hello, this is Miss Plata, Silver Plata, and I am here for 6th grade math. Welcome back. This time we are going to continue with Module 2, Topic A. And in this lesson, we are now Lesson 6, More Division Stories. Now remember we did this in Lesson 5? Okay, now don't worry, lesson 5 is easier because we have steps that we followed to write division stories. Now, why do we need another lesson just to write more division stories? Well, first of all, if you can write your own division stories, that only goes to show that you understood the concept of dividing fractions. Okay, so let's begin with what you are expected to do today. Okay? Of course, you will demonstrate further understanding of division of fractions by creating your own word problems. Now remember, when you are creating your own division story problems, it has to be clear, it has to be realistic, and it has to make sense. So let's begin. Okay, what are the steps in writing division stories? We did this in lesson 5. We're going to use this again for lesson 6. Step 1, decide on an interpretation. There are two interpretations, remember? What are those? Yes, partitive division and measurement division. Now for this lesson, we are going to use the first one, partitive division. Now you still remember what partitive division is? It is the divisor tells the number of groups and the quotient names the size. For example, okay, just to review. Let's say I have 24 divided by 6. Okay, now using partitive division, I am thinking with this expression, 24 is 6 groups of what size? So that's partitive. Okay, the quotient, 24 divided by 6 is 4. Okay, the 4 tells the size of each group. All right, so that's what partitive division, and that is what we're going to use for, I think, this entire lesson. Okay, now what is step 2 in writing division stories? Of course, you are going to draw a model. Now in the previous lessons, we learned two models, tape diagram and a number line. Okay, so you can use whichever is appropriate for the situation. And then you find the answer, solving your division problems. Okay, whether it's fraction by fraction or a whole number divided by a fraction or a mixed number divided by a fraction. Okay, step 4, you choose a unit. There are so many, tons of unit of measure that you can use. There's yards, there's miles, there's gallons, pint, etc., etc. And then finally, you set up the situation based on your division expression. Okay, so make sure it is clear, make sure it makes sense, and make sure it's realistic. Okay, so let's begin. All right, now remember we are going to use partitive division. For example 1, we have 50 divided by 2/3. So this is simply saying 50 is 2/3 group of what size? Okay, so let's follow this step. Okay, decide an interpretation. Now we already said partitive division is what we are going to use for this problem. Okay, so again, 50 divided by 2/3 simply means 50 is 2/3 group of what size? Okay, what's step 2? Draw a model. Okay, so let's begin. Here is 3 parts. Okay, and it says 2/3, what do we know, represents 50, right? So what do we want to know? We want to know that 50 is 2/3 of what size? So there is the unknown. We want to know the whole thing, okay? So we continue. Step 3, we find the answer. All right, so how do we find the answer? I see in my model that these two parts right here, 2 units, represents 50. I want to know how much is 1 unit. So 1 unit is 50 divided by 2 gives me 25. So what does that mean? That means that each of this unit is 25, 25, and 25. Now remember, when we started with this expression, we said we want to know the size of the whole thing. Now, because we know each unit right here, we can already see what the whole thing is. What's the size of the whole thing? So what is the whole thing? There are 3 units there, and each unit is 25. So 25 times 3 is 75. So here, the unknown is 75. So there. Decide on an interpretation. We use partitive division. Draw a model. We use a tape diagram. And then we find the answer. And the answer to this expression is 75. Now, what's the next step? The next step is choose a unit. Okay, so in this case, money units are often convenient to write word problems, because in here, if we use money, okay, we can see the before and after amount of money. In this situation, that's what we're going to use. And then we set up a situation writing our division problem. Okay, so let's begin. Here is an example of, remember the expression 50 divided by 2/3. Okay, so remember our model. Let me just rewrite here on this page. Okay, this 2/3 right here represents 50, and we want to know the size of the whole thing, and in our calculation the whole thing is 75. So I am just rewriting what we did from the previous slide, okay, so that we know if this division story problem is appropriate for this expression. So let's read. Adam spent $50 on the new graphing calculator. This was 2/3 of his money. How much money did he start with? So does that make sense? Is that a good situation for this expression, 50 divided by 2/3? So he started with, he spent $50. This is the whole amount that he has, okay? And that was it's being asked, how much money did he start with? All right, so let's continue. What I want you to do for exercise 1, I want you to use the same dividend and divisor. And what is that? That is 50 divided by 2/3. And then I want you to create your own story problem. If you have someone with you right now, you can encourage that person to help you out with this and write your own story problem about 50 divided by 2/3. You may use the same unit, okay? In that example, we use the dollar, that's our unit, but you can use other units as well, like ounces, yards, miles, whatever you prefer, okay? So go on ahead and write your own story problem for 50 divided by 2/3. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can pause this and you can come back with your answer. All right? Now, here is another example of a story problem for 50 divided by 2/3. Okay, so let's take a look. Ronaldo had or has ridden 50 miles during his bicycle race and is 2/3 of the way to the finish line. How long is the race? Does that make sense? Okay, does it match our 50 divided by 2/3? Now let's see. If I use that tape diagram that we did, okay, again, this is 50, which is the 2/3, okay, and the unknown is the size of the whole thing, which we knew already from our calculation is 75. So let's see if this story problem matches the expression. He has ridden 50 miles during his bicycle race and it is 2/3 of the way. So that 50 is 2/3 of the way. The question is, how long is the race? So is it asking the whole thing? Definitely. So the whole thing is 75. So the race was 75 miles. So that makes sense. That matches our expression. The story problem matches the expression. All right. So we continue. Here's an example, okay, 2. What do you notice? Yes, both are fractions this time. All right, 1/2 divided by 3/4. What is step 1? Decide on an interpretation. And of course, we decided that for this lesson, we are going to use the partitive division, okay, as our interpretation. Now here, 1/2 divided by 3/4, it's asking you 3/4 to be the number of groups. So I'm asking myself, 1/2 is 3/4 of what number? 1/2 is 3/4 of one number. Okay, so let me write that down. 1/2 is 3/4 of what number? All right, so that's what we're looking for. So step 2, we are going to draw a model. So drawing a model, well, let's use tape diagram one more time. Okay, so I'm going to start with 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what did it say? That 3/4 represents 1/2. Okay. And what we want to know is, what is that number? Okay. Does that make sense? What we want to know is that 1/2 is 3/4 of what number? So there's my 3/4. 1, 2, 3 out of 4. And that 3/4 is half of what number? Okay. So we continue, we find the answer. Step 3 is finding the answer. Okay, so here we go. It says here, we can see in the model that 3 units represents 1/2. So we want to know what is 1 unit. Okay. 1 unit is 1/2, of course, divided by 3 because there are 3 parts shaded there. Okay, now remember how we related division and multiplication in this process, how they are related, how they are the same. Okay, so 1/2 divided by 3, remember, is the same as saying 1/3 times 1/2. And of course, that would be 1/6. Okay? So here we go back to this problem. 1/2 divided by 3/4 equals 1/3 times 1/2 equals 1/6. So now we can answer this unknown right here, 1/6. So what does that mean? That 1/2 is 3/4 of 1/6. Does that make sense? All right. So step 4, choose a unit. Step 5, set up a situation. Okay. Now that we have the answer, which is 1/6, we can move to the 4th step, which is choosing the unit. So in this, let me see what I chose. Okay. Here, what will make sense? We can use time in hours, we can use distance in feet, and we can use eggs in dozens. Okay, now why do we have these options? Because all of those have halves and sixths, and they are identifiable, parts of an hour, a foot, and a dozen. So given all that, this is what I came up with. So let's see if that works. After traveling for a half hour, Scott completed 3/4 of his commute. How long is the commute? So let's see if that works with our expression. The expression was 1/2, excuse me, divided by 3/4. Okay, so in our model, if you remember, we started with 3/4 and we said the 3/4 represents, what is that? The 3/4 represent half of his commute. What we want to know is how long is the commute. Okay, so given that, remember, what's this 1/3 of 1/2 equals 1/6. Okay, so there you go. 1/2 is 3/4 of what number? 1/6. So how long is the commute? The commute is 1/6.